Greetings, I'm Demonac, and it's arena time. So my two choices for the arena this time are Hunter and Mage, but I'm going to go ahead and unlock that secret choice, the one I always ignore because I hate them in the arena anyway. I'm going to do the basics video for the Warrior. We're going to try and build our deck here. Now the Warrior's power is just flat out the weakest power in the arena, in my opinion. Some people disagree. But in constructed play, the Warrior has several ways that they can gain advantages out of their armor, most of which being the epic card Shield Bash, which is just 1 mana, deal damage to a minion equal to the amount of armor that you have. It's a very cheap, very effective removal card a lot of the times. At worst, you can armor up from 0 to 2 and do 2 damage with it, and if you're doing any more than 2 damage, it's very efficient. But it doesn't. The Warrior's armor doesn't really affect the battle heal. It's just like the Priest's heal, except he can only heal himself. The advantage is that he can go above 30, but whoop-de-doo. Now the Warrior needs that. There's good synergy with the Warrior's abilities, because the Warrior has more weapons than any other class, and they rely a lot on weapons to kill minions with. And I think, I don't like the Warrior deck for the arena because I feel like you have to be a lot luckier to get the right stuff to have a really solid Warrior deck. But if you could get a lot of weapons, and there are 2 very strong common weapon cards that we'll hopefully see several copies of each. If you can get a lot of those good weapons, each weapon card can kill more than 1 minion, and that starts going a long way in the arena. But otherwise, it's pretty hard. Anyhow, so our first choice is here, the Light Warden, who combos well with healing, because whenever any character is healed, this means if you're playing against a priest and you play the Light Warden, they're going to be annoyed. Because if they heal themselves or one of their minions, your Light Warden still gets +2 attack. That's a permanent +2 attack, so every time anything gets healed, the Light Warrior gets permanently bigger in attack. She is a little bit fragile, but she's a pretty good 1-cost minion if you have a reasonable amount of healing in your deck, which if you're not a priest is probably not the case. Well, priest or shaman. It's weird with shamans. But anyway, Commanding Shout is our first Warrior card here, and it is pretty unusual, and it's a very strong card, but one I'm probably not going to pick because it doesn't come up as often as you'd think. So for 2 mana, first thing to note, this card draws you a card. If you've got no reason to play Commanding Shout right now, but you just need to get better stuff, you can just pay 2 mana, play this card, and draw another card. So it's hard to imagine it not being good when you have that, because whether it's useful or not, you're drawing a card. But its power is your minions can't be reduced below 1 health this turn. Your minions are invincible, basically. Only on your turn, right? Because you can only play spells on your turn. But this means that you can attack if you had a Light Warden that got pumped up to 7 attack, because healing had gone off 3 times while she was on the board. You could play Commanding Shout and have her attack a Twilight Drake that was a 4/7. She would kill it, because the enemy minions don't benefit from this, and she would just get reduced to 1 hit point, because she can't be reduced below 1 hit point while Commanding Shout is going. So this lets you do a whole bunch of... If you were in a position where there are minions on both sides, and you can do a bunch of trading, like you attack with your minion, and it will kill, but also be killed by an enemy minion, this turns that into a purely winning situation, which is amazing, and it draws you a card. So that sounds amazing. I just find in practice, it's not always that easy to set up. You'd usually rather have another minion or a spell. So I'm going to pass this up, even though it's probably silly, because it can be so strong, but I'm going to take the Twilight Drake, because it's a lot like a Yeti. Sometimes it'll be worse than the Yeti, sometimes it'll be better. It's kind of like another Yeti in your deck. So we've got the Voodoo Doctor here, we know him. 2/1 for 1 is fine, and he heals 2. He's a pretty good 1-drop. The Flesh-Eating Ghoul, we know, can be scary if he can survive. 2/3 for 3 is not very good, but you just play him before doing any minion killing, and he can end up a decent size. He's a little fragile. And Cleave here is one of the Warrior's main ways of killing things other than weapons, right? It's just a common basic warrior card. It deals 2 damage to 2 random enemy minions. This sounds pretty decent. It has several problems. If the main problem is just if they only have 1 minion, you can't play cleave. There have to be at least 2 enemy minions to randomize. So if they have 1 minion, this is a dead card in your hand. It does nothing. You literally cannot play it. If they have 2 minions, it's fantastic. This will do 2 damage to each minion for 2 mana. That's pretty cool. If you had any spell power, it would do more. Because even though you're a warrior, spell damage still works on your spells. It's just how the game works. If they have 3 minions, it's still not bad, but now it's going to miss one of them, and you don't control which one. So it's really great if they have 2 minions. This is a very efficient way to beat them up. But in almost any other circumstance, it is problematic at best. However, this is the arena. I don't know how much stuff I'm going to get for killing things, so I'm going to take the cleave. Here's some more warrior cards. We got the River Croc, obviously. We know them. We have the Kokron Elite. Now remember, when a minion is like class specific, it kind of has more points to work with. They're going to have more stats than a neutral minion with the exact same abilities and the same casting cost. The Kokron Elite here is a 4/3 charge for 4. 4/3 for 4? It's not the greatest stats. It's not bad, but charge normally costs a lot of points, right? A 3/1 with charge costs 3 mana. This guy has 2 extra hit points and 1 more attack for that 1 more mana. His stats are a little bit better distributed, like he can hit something and maybe survive. He's not automatically killed by hero abilities or any area damage at all, like the 3/1 guy is. So he's pretty decent. Now he does still tend to come into play and die, but if you play him just to damage your opponent, 4 damage for 4 mana is still perfectly decent, and it's not quite as trivial for them to just kill him off as it is for a 1 toughness guy. So he's pretty cool that way. The other guy to compare him to is there's that neutral Stormwind guy. He's 2/5 for 4 with charge. And that's kind of weird because the Kokron, like 2/5 is 7, 4 and 3 is 7. They actually have the same total stats. So really, this guy ought to be better than he is, because he's a class-specific card. He should have 1 more point. I'm guessing that he probably originally was a 4/4, and during their playtesting, Blizzard probably just had to reduce his stats because he was too good at that point. I would not be surprised at all. They're not afraid. They have their formulas. The formulas that they start out with are a guideline, but they adjust things. They've nerfed a couple of other minions, like the shouldn't mention things if I can't think of their name off the top of my head. The 3/2 cleric, whatever it is, 3/2 Sun Fury something, who she's 3/2 for 3 and gives +1/+1 to a friendly minion. She used to be a 3/3. I was there when they reduced her toughness. She was so good, there was no reason to ever not play 2 of her in almost any deck. At 3/2, I mean, she's almost as good. She still does as much damage. She still fulfills the exact same function. But now, she's just that little bit more fragile. She doesn't win against 2/3s the way she used to. Suddenly, is not as automatic that she is better than almost everything else. And they like to make those little tweaks. I'm guessing the Kokron Elite may have been a 4/4 when they originally planned it. And then they had to scale back his stats because he was too good. Whereas the 2/5 charge guy, he comes in, he can kill 1 small thing and survive, which is cool. He can come in and do a little damage to a big thing and maybe barely survive. But just the 2 damage charge for 4 mana is nowhere near as good as the more offense-oriented charge minion. Anyway, he is pretty solid. He's very good. This is another interesting warrior card. So it's a 0 mana spell, which that's always awesome. You can do an extra thing on your turn, and for 0 mana spells, this one's pretty strong. First off, it deals 1 damage to a minion. you can use that on a friendly minion or an enemy minion. Like you can just use this if the enemy minion has 1 hit point left. You can play this and kill it. Like if the 3/1 charge guy comes out, attacks you, okay, that's fine. On your turn, you can just inner rage him, and he gets so angry he dies because he can't take that 1 damage. But you could also use this on, say, the River Croc. It would take 1 damage, and the other ability of it is it gives +2 attack. Now, if you use it on an enemy minion that doesn't die, it would also get +2 attack, so you gotta watch that. You're only gonna use this on an enemy minion if you're finishing it right away, pretty much. But you could use this on a River Croc. You play the River Croc second turn, he's a 2/3, fine. Then, on your third turn, when you're ready to attack, you could just play Inner Rage for free, deal 1 damage to him, and turn him into a 4/2. Or, you could play a Kokron Elite, and even though you're out of mana, immediately Inner Rage him, turn him into a 6/2 for 4 mana that can attack right away. So this is a pretty interesting aggressive card. Now, I'm really worried about efficiency in the arena, and this is very flexible, but I really need to have minions that I need to make sure my deck is really heavily stacked with good minions, so I'm going to take the Kokron Elite for now. We've got the Dalaran Mage. I mean, his stats are a little low for 3 mana. And he's giving you +1 spell damage, okay, but really he's kind of weak. I think he's another one of those guys where if they increased either of his stats, if he was a 2/4 for 3, he'd be amazing. If he was a 1/5 for 3, he'd be very tough. I mean, it probably would be okay, but I think they probably found that he was a little bit too strong at that point. Lord of the Arena is a taunt minion, which I might need some of, because warriors, if I start getting weapons, they're great for killing multiple minions with 1 card, but you take a lot of damage in the process. So having some taunt later in the game would be good. But there's also the Abusive Sergeant, who is just so efficient and good for attacking and killing stuff. That +2 attack on a minion until end of turn is amazing for a guy who costs 1 mana. So I think I'm going to go with the Abusive Sergeant for now. We're going to hope I can get some other fat stuff. Now this is fat, but I don't want it, because the Core Hound, again, I don't like the way his stats are ranged. He's just too fragile for something you paid 7 mana for. Although, if he ever hits your opponent, wow, is that bad. And at 7 mana, there is a warrior card that would combo fantastically with him. It's called Charge. It's a spell for 3 mana. It gives target minion +2 attack permanently, and it gives that minion charge. So if I had 10 mana, I could play the Core Hound, then charge him. He'd become an 11/5 who could attack right away. 11 damage on my opponent. They never see it coming. If I had 2 charges in my deck already, I'd be pretty tempted to take him, but that's not the case, and I think he sucks, so I'm not going to take him. I mean, he is a beast, so if you're a hunter, you might be able to get more advantage of it. Hunters have a way to have a minion that gives all their other beasts, well, it gives all beasts charge. If you had that in play, and then the next turn you play the Core Hound, that would hurt. Plus, they have ways to give beasts bonus stats and taunt. But anyway, the Leper Gnome is a good aggressive minion. The 2/1 for 1, again, is perfectly fine stats. And when he dies, no matter how he dies, your opponent's going to take 2 damage. So the second you play him, it's like your opponent has 2 less hit points, unless they manage to silence him somehow or steal him or something. Now, Rampage is a really interesting card, and I keep trying to build a constructed deck around it, and it never works out for me. But I mean, for 2 mana, you give a minion +3/+3, which is huge and awesome. You can only use it on a minion that is damaged. So you can never cast it on a Leper Gnome unless the gnome had been buffed some other way and then taken damage. Because if the Leper Gnome takes any damage, he only had 1 hit point, he'd be dead. But, remember that Inner Rage I had before? If I played the Kokron Elite for 4 mana, Inner Rage him for free, it would deal 1 damage to him and give him +2 attack. If I had 2 mana left that turn, I could then Rampage him. Because now he's damaged, right? And that would get him up. The combination of him and those 2 other cards would make him like a 9/5 charge, which is pretty scary. This is a ton of stats. There are a whole bunch of things that seem like they could work out well with it, but it never works out well for me. I'm going to take the Leper Gnome and make sure I have more early plays. Okay, here's your warrior card for set. Shield block. It's 3 mana. You gain 5 armor. I mean, you already have this ability. For 2 mana, you can gain 2 armor. It costs you no cards at all. But shield block doesn't really cost you a card because it draws you a card. So for 3 mana, you gain 5 armor and you draw a card to replace it. It's kind of free, except for the 3 mana. And that's kind of that's the part that pinches a little bit, because early in the game, you don't want to be spending your turn playing this. So it's going to be either a dead card in your hand, or if you have nothing better to do, you're going to play it, but you're still going to waste like a whole turn playing this just to draw something hopefully more useful. Now, wasting a turn playing this is relative, because if the 5 armor is more than the amount of damage your opponent does to you, it's not too bad. The real reason it's a good card is if you have the partner card, Shield Bash, which again is epic. It's just a 1-cost spell, but it deals... You pick a minion and deal damage to that minion equal to the amount of armor you have. So if you go Shield Block, Shield Bash, for 4 mana, you could go from 0 to 5 armor and then hit a minion for 5. I can't count on getting them. I'd rather have one of these minions. So the Flesh-Eating Ghoul, it's strong. He can go kind of crazy. I'm going to take the Amani Berserker because he's... Look at the comparison between the two. They have the exact same starting stats. He costs 1 less. If he takes to any damage and lives, he just gets +3 attack. The Flesh-Eating Ghoul can get +3 attack if he's alive to see 3 minions die, and then he can keep going past that and get even more. But really, those abilities are pretty similar in value a lot of the time. I mean, the Berserker's is harder to trigger without him dying, but the Ghoul is very high priority to kill anyway, whereas he's just a very efficient 2-mana creature. I'm going to go with him. Oh, there's my 3/1 charge guy I was talking about. Now we have the Gnomish Inventor, who is pretty useful. I mean, 2/4 for 4 is just bad stats. But he's giving you a card. Like, he's drawing you a whole card. So that 2/4 is not too bad, considering that it didn't cost you a card. It cost you mana. It slows you down in terms of being able to get to cast other stuff, but it helps you dig through your deck faster to find the cards that you want to play for the next turn. Now there's also the Dread Corsair here. He's a 3/3 taunt for 4 mana. Now, you may have noticed there's another neutral minion, the Grizzly Bears. It's a 3/3 taunt for 3 mana. And it's a beast. He's a pirate. Beast is honestly a better type than pirate. There's virtually nothing that affects pirates right now in the game. There'll probably be some in later expansions. Not much right now. But the Corsair costs 1 less for every attack worth of weapon that you have out. So there's a warrior weapon. It costs 2, has 3 attack. If I had that weapon out, the Dread Corsair would only cost 1 to get a 3/3 taunt. That's pretty cool. I don't have any weapons yet. I'm sure as hell hoping to get some, but I don't know if I'm going to take him. I think I'm actually going to take the Gnomish Inventor, because I'm thinking I have a lot of cheap stuff so far, relatively cheap things, and drawing another card will help me to counteract the cheapness of the stuff. On the other hand, this guy is pay 3 mana, deal 3 damage. Like, he will help me kill stuff. You know what? I'm actually going to take the Wolf Rider. Never mind all that. He's charged. He's good. Okay, so we could get a Fen Creeper. He's a little bit expensive, but he's a very tough taunt. His stats are arranged well. Another Kokron Elite, which would be very aggressive. Also aggressive is Heroic Strike. Heroic Strike is kind of weird, because you think, like, you're a warrior. You can get all kinds of weapons. Why do you need this card that is kind of like a one-use weapon? You know, 4 attack for 2 mana. I mean, there's a weapon that's in the whatever Fiery War Axe or something that's 2 mana. It's a weapon with 3 attack. It has 2 uses. You get almost twice as much value out of the axe as you do out of the Heroic Strike. The difference is you can use Heroic Strike whether or not you have a weapon. If you don't have a weapon, it gives your hero +4 attack, and if your attack is not 0, you can attack. So your hero could kill an enemy Kokron Elite, for example, taking the damage just like you would with a weapon. But if you had a weapon, if you already had that 3 attack weapon, and then you played Heroic Strike on it, now you have 7 attack for this one turn, which means that I could one-shot the Fen Creeper using 1 use for my axe and using the Heroic Strike. The other thing is Heroic Strike can attack the other player, right? I mean, just like any weapon. Can be a really good surprise card for killing your opponent at the end. I mean, Kokron Elite, you have to pay 4 mana to get a 4 attack charge. If you're just doing damage to your opponent and you're just looking to finish them this turn, the Heroic Strike costs half as much and does just as much damage. Earlier in the game, you'd rather have Kokron Elite because he'll do his 4 damage and then stay out in play. Or you could use him to kill a minion and not take the damage yourself from the enemy minion. But when you're trying to just finish your opponent, saving up Heroic Strikes in your hand can let you just go boom, hit them for an unexpectedly large amount of damage. 4 plus your weapon, plus if you have another Heroic Strike, that's another 4. It adds up very fast. At this point, though, I'm going to take the Kokron Elite because I still feel like I just need to have like a lot of minions. So there's Charge. Give a friendly minion plus 2 attack and charge. I already have a lot of charge minions, but I'm thinking of taking this because now if I get some fat things later on, I can have a combo. On the other hand, the Bloodsail Raider would work it's just like a croc right now, right? A 2/3 for 2. But if I can get any weapons, and I damn well better get a whole bunch of weapons. I'm already a third of the way through my deck almost. I have no weapons. I want lots of weapons. So make that happen, stupid game. But if I have a weapon out, like if I had that 3 attack axe I keep mentioning, and I play the Bloodsail Raider, she would get 3 attack, like whatever the axe had, added to her attack, but it stays with her permanently, even after the weapon is gone. So play the axe, and then play her, and she'd be a 5/3 for 2 mana. You can't get a 5/3 for 2 mana. She's kind of crazy that way. The Rocketeer is good for finishing people normally, but here's what, you compare her to the Kokron Elite, right? She's a little bit more aggressive with her stats, which for a charge minion is pretty good. But she has 7 points of stats. He has 7 points of stats. She only does 1 more damage, and she costs an extra 2 mana. So, okay, that Stormwind guy I was comparing him to is very interesting, because his stats are distributed weird. But the Kokron Elite has way better stats for the cost than the Rocketeer. So there's no way I'm taking the Rocketeer. I got a deck full of these. I can get more stuff. Charge or Bloodsail Raider? You know what? I don't have the fat things to give charge to yet. So I'll probably regret it, but I'm going to take the Bloodsail Raider. And hope I get the weapons. If I don't get the weapons, I'm going to lose anyway. He would have been a good guy to charge. Because again, if I have 10 mana, I can play him for 7, then charge him and hit for 9. He's still not horrible. I mean, he's a little fragile for the cost, but at least when you play him, he's unlikely to die before he attacks because of that stealth. That said, I'm probably not picking him. He's not my favorite. The Emperor Cobra is pretty interesting because, I mean, it'll usually die in the process, but it can kill anything that it damages. The Kodo, of course, is a 3/5 for 5. It's not horrible stats, and because at least he's tough. And he kills something when he comes into play. He can blow up an enemy and Emperor Cobra, which would be handy. Like, you can only kill things with small attack. They could have small attack and large hit points. You can kill that 2/7 Berserker Troll guy, so that's pretty good. This is kind of a tough choice. My deck is pretty fast already. The thing is, there are several ways that I could potentially get the Cobra to charge. Oh, I'm just not getting the warrior cards that I want to have to know what to do. And now I'm going to take the Cobra just in case. It's cheap, it's castable. Here's another card that would benefit all my weapons that I don't have. I better get some damn weapons. A Novice Engineer would help me get through my deck faster. But I mean, what you actually get for her card is just a 1/1, which is kind of crappy. You compare that to the 2/4 gnome who draws you a card, and with him, you're paying a lot more mana. Like, he costs twice as much. He still only draws 1 card. So if your purpose is just to go through your deck as fast as possible, that's a little expensive. But she is doing basically nothing but drawing you a card. Her entire purpose is just to help you go through your deck faster. You get a 1/1, but that's like kind of sad. The 2/4 can survive some stuff. He can live long enough to be buffed by something else. He can actually do some work. So you're getting something for the 2/4 guy as well as drawing a card. Whereas the Novice Engineer, it's almost like you're not getting something other than drawing a card. Another Kokron Elite would be pretty good. The Spiteful Smith, I don't have a lot of things in my deck that are tough right now. I've got the Twilight Drake, which can be tough. It depends when I get it and how many cards I've got in my hand. I'm thinking I'm going to take the Spiteful Smith over this guy. It's a little weird, but he's very tough, and if I have any weapons, the fact that he can give my weapon +2 attack when he's damaged is awesome. If I get any weapons. It's getting worse and worse. Okay, I don't like him. He's expensive. He can be damaging if he's buffed, but he pays too many stats to have Wind Fury. I mean, for a guy who, if he was like a 3/2 with Wind Fury, he might be more interesting. He'd be very fragile then, but he could do 6, as a 3-mana creature that could do 6 damage, that'd be pretty good, with even before buffs. The way his stats are distributed, he's not really all that tough, but he also, even though he can attack twice, he doesn't attack all that well. I think I'm going to take the shield block, because at least it'll help me go through my deck faster, and I might need some extra toughness. We'll see. So to get the Corsair, again, I don't have any weapons yet. I don't know how good that would be. Get the Bloodfen Raptor. I have a fair amount of cheap sort of minions so far. For the number of cards in my deck, 4 of them are 2 or less cost minions. We're all pretty good at their jobs. I don't feel like I need him. Like, there have been some games where I turn down cards that I like better and take him just because you need to fill out the casting cost. I'm fine. I can go bigger. She gives me a Yeti worth of stats. Like, split into 2 minions, because she's got her 2/1, and then she's a 2/4. A Yeti worth of stats for 4 mana is still a Yeti worth of stats. I'm going to take her for more fighting power. I've got a Legendary. Well, this is going to be an interesting choice. I don't see that in my playthroughs very often. It's interesting for a basic one. You don't see that too much either. So, Blood Mage Thalnos is kind of interesting. He's very cheap. Normally you think of Legendary, you think of big-ass, like, crazy psycho minions like these guys. He's very different. He's cheap. He's like, actually, if you can get one of him, he's the kind of guy that can go in almost every deck, and it's kind of handy. So, for 2 mana, he's only a 1/1. He's not, like, big for his cost by any means. You can get a 2/1 for 1 mana. But when he has Death Rattle, draw a card, so he's like a Loot Hoarder, basically, right? Except Loot Hoarder's a 2/1. Blood Mage Thalnos is only a 1/1 Loot Hoarder, but he also comes with spell damage +1, which is a pretty darn good ability for a guy who costs 2 and doesn't really cost you a card. Again, if he's not silenced, he's going to draw you a card when he dies. So he's very good for that. Like, if I had Cleave in my hand and him, for 4 mana, I could play him first and then do a 3 damage Cleave. Like, you just play him before you play a damaging spell. That's pretty cool. I don't have many damage spells in this deck, and I don't think that's the way to go. The Beast is interesting. He'd be more interesting if I had stuff that benefits from beasts, because the Beast is, of course, a beast. He's the legendary version of that Core Hound I don't like, right? The Core Hound is a 9/5 for 7. The Beast is a 9/7, so he's 2 hit points tougher, and he costs 1 less mana. He comes out for 6 mana, which is very cheap, actually. But he has a Death Rattle that's actually a drawback. When he dies, your opponent gets a 3/3 minion for free. And of course, if the Beast dies on your turn, then their 3/3 is going to be able to attack right away, because they're going to have it at the beginning of their turn. More likely, he dies on the opponent's turn, and 3/3 won't be able to attack right away, but that's still a little bit risky. On the other hand, there's Baron Geddon, who is more fragile. Like, he's weaker than the Core Hound that I don't like, which is a 9/5 for 7. He's only a 7/5 for 7. What's up with that? Well, it's because at the end of every turn, at the end of your turn, he deals 2 damage to all characters except himself. He's going to hit you for 2, but he's also going to hit your opponent for 2. He's going to hit all minions other than himself for 2. He's actually kind of amazing. I have a copy of him, and I play with him in a lot of my decks, because he is like an extra area damage spell in your deck that also happens to come with a giant fat minion. So, I mean, 7 mana is a lot to pay to do 2 damage to all minions, which is kind of what he's doing. he's actually doing 2 damage to everything. So he's kind of like a weaker version of the Warlock card that deals 3 damage to everything. But he doesn't hurt himself, and you get a 7/5 as part of that. I mean, you can't do the damage to break down your opponent's defenses and then attack that same turn, because he doesn't do it until the end of turn. But a lot of times, if you're getting swarmed by weak minions, he can come out and save your butt. So as much as I'd like to play with one of the guys who's different than what I normally have, I'm going to take him because he's strong. He's very good. He's also at 7 mana or less. He's also chargeable if I had charge. The spell charge, that is. So, I am deficient in the taunt department, so the Booty Big Bodyguard would not go amiss in here. Again, his offense-oriented stats goes a little bit weird with taunt. He ends up being a little bit overpriced for how durable he is, but he's still there. He can do a lot of damage, and you know, if I had those copies of charge, he'd be another thing that'd be decent to charge. Then there's the Scarlet Crusader, who can take 2 hits. She's 3 mana, and the first thing it hits her is just going to hit her Divine Shield. Doesn't matter how much damage it is, she'll survive that. So for 3 mana, a 3/1 that can take 2 hits is pretty darn good. Or I could take the Healing Yeti, the Darksteel Healer. I mean, Yeti is a 4/5 for 4. She costs 1 more, but she restores 2 health to you and all your minions. I probably could use more of this in my deck, except all my guys are kind of fragile. Like, a lot of them are unlikely to survive anything anyway. So you know what? I'm going to take the Scarlet Crusader. She's a more fighting sort of minion. Looks like I'm going for that sort of 3 and 4 cost fighting. Oh, this is a confusing set. Okay. The Doomsayer, he only costs 2 mana. He's a 0/7. He's very tough. Like, it takes a lot of effort to get rid of him. Although, he's not really hard to kill because he has no attack. So, it's safe to attack him. They can hit him with their 3/1s and stuff, and they won't die. If he was a 1/7, he'd be way tougher, even though his number of hit points would be the same. But yes, he's a 0/7 at the start of your next turn. Like, well, at the start of any turn when he's in play. But basically, you play him, and then your opponent's going to get a turn, and then at the start of your next turn, he's going to go off and destroy all minions, including himself. He makes you play all weird. Because here's the thing. If you have more minions than your opponent, you probably don't want to play him. You already have the advantage, and all your opponent has to do is wait you out, and then like he'll just attack you with all his minions on his turn, and let your Doomsayer kill your superior army. So that's no good. You need him for coming from behind, right? But if your opponent has 7 or more attack worth of minions in play, at best, he's going to use those guys to kill the Doomsayer and not lose anything. So it's hard to find a circumstance where he can come out and where he's killing enough enemy things to make it worthwhile, not killing enough friendly things to make it too expensive, but where he can somehow survive long enough to do his thing. Because normally, in the situations when you most want him to kill everything, your opponent's just going to kill him first. I guess if you have like a big taunt, and then you play him, but you already had a big taunt, you could be playing other things to reverse your situation. So, I'm not a big fan of him, but he has a very powerful effect. Anything with an effect that powerful probably has a use. If you were a mage with one of those with all the freezing cards, like Frost Nova and Cone of Cold and Blizzard, you could freeze all your opponent's minions, then play the Doomsayer. And then if they can't kill him with a spell or a charge or something, which is actually pretty tough at 7 hit points, that would be pretty obnoxious. I'm going to go put these guys in my mage deck. Anyway, the Hungry Crab is he's like a Murloc hoser, although I guess if you played with Murlocs yourself, you could take advantage of that too, sort of. A 1/2 for 1, I mean, that's a fine number of stats. It's kind of weirdly distributed. He is a beast, so I guess if you were a hunter, you could do some tricks. But when he comes into play, he can destroy any Murloc of your choice. So he can, if your opponent has Murloc out, this guy comes out and blows it up for 1 mana. That's pretty good. And if he destroys a Murloc, he gets +2/+2. So at that point, he's a 3/4 for 1 mana. But it's pretty situational. How often does your opponent have a Murloc, and you have this guy in your hand? Even if you have him in your deck, the chances of you having him in your hand at the time when your opponent plays a Murloc that doesn't die right away, it's getting kind of dubious. So we're going to be taking the Sea Giant. Now, 10 mana is super expensive. You don't want a 10 mana minion that's just an 8/8 with no abilities. Well, what is his ability? He costs 1 less for every other minion on the battlefield. So if the battlefield is getting crowded, like if your opponent has you badly outnumbered, or just if both people have 3 or 4 minions out, he can become much cheaper. Usually you should be able to get him out for, 8 mana at least, which is not horrible. And often he'll be cheaper. So it's worth a try. Those were all epic cards, actually, not just rare. So here's another bonus rare. I've had crazy rarity of stuff, but I've got no weapons yet. I think I'm going to get pissed off and screwed again. So we have the Master Swordsmith. He's only a 1/3 for 2. He's a little bit weak, but again, the turn he comes into play, he gives +1 attack to another friendly minion. So it's kind of like you're getting 2-3 worth of stats, which is worth it. And then if he survives any longer, he'll keep giving +1 attack at random to one of your minions every turn. He just can't give it to himself, so you do have to have other stuff out. There's the Gadgetzan Auctioneer. If I had a lot of spells, especially cheap spells, this would be awesome, because whenever you cast a spell, you draw a card. He's a 4/4 for 5. He's not very strong for 5 mana, but that's not horrible. Like, you still get decent stats. And he can draw you multiple cards. In fact, in some decks, he draws them like a ton of cards in a game and wins them the game. Look up Miracle Rogue on the internet if you want to see what I mean. But I'm going to take the Defender of Argus, because for 4 mana, he's a 2/3, but he can also give two of your minions +1/+1, assuming you have 2 other minions out. That would be 4/5 worth of stats, if he can get to use it on both sides. And he gives taunt to those minions. It lets you give taunt to things that otherwise don't have taunt, and that's a very handy ability. So we're going to take that for sure. I need the taunt anyway. Okay, here's a weapon. So we could take the Razorfen Hunter. It's not my favorite minion. Battle Rage is an interesting card. I mean, this is the sort of main card drawing, if you could call it that, for the warrior. You compare it to, okay, the mage can pay 3 mana and just draw 2 cards with the Arcane Intellect. The warrior with Battle Rage pays 2 mana, and then they draw 1 card for every damaged friendly character. When they say character, that's minions and heroes. So if you're not at full 30 hit points, if you've taken any damage over the course of the game, this will draw you 1 card. It'll at least replace itself, right? If you have any 1 minion damaged, then you can play this, draw 1 card for that minion, and presumably 1 card for yourself. So you're drawing 2 cards for 2 mana. Just like Arcane Intellect, it's cheaper, but you have to set it up. You do have to have a minion that took damage but survived somehow. That's not too hard to engineer for 1 minion. It can be tricky to get to where you have more than 1 minion out who's damaged without killing them. But if you have out several minions, and then you can Whirlwind Attack, which is a 1 mana warrior card I haven't seen yet here. It's 1 mana, it deals 1 damage to all minions. Well, suddenly, if you can pair that with Battle Rage, you can draw a card for every minion you have, +1 for yourself. At which point it's crazy. I don't have those, and plus I've been complaining I need weapons. If the next 3 cards are all Arcanite Reapers, I'll probably take Arcanite Reapers for all of them. Because look at this. It costs 5. It's a weapon with 5 attack and 2 uses. So, for that 5 mana and 1 card, the fact this 1 card is an important deal, I could do 10 damage to my opponent over 2 turns, which is very efficient. Or, I could kill 2 minions, each of which had up to 5 hit points. Now, whatever their attack is, I would take that much damage, just like all weapons. Hopefully I could reduce the impact of that, because as a warrior, I can pay 2 mana and gain 2 hit points every turn, basically, with my ability. But still, if I kill 2 medium to large minions for 1 card, that's really efficient in the arena. Or it's really efficient anywhere, but especially in the arena, it's hard to do that. So, I'm definitely taking the Arcanite Reaper, and I hope for more weapons. this deck has so many extra rares and stuff, I'm going to lose horribly. It just always works out that way. I don't know why. So the Injured Blade Master would combo with that Rampage card I had earlier, right? The one where it's +3/+3 for 2 mana, but you can only play it on a damaged minion. When he comes into play, he damages himself. So he's effectively a 4/3 for 3, but his maximum hit points are still 7, so he counts as damaged. He would also count as damaged for that card drawing thing I was talking about. So he's not bad. I don't think he's what this deck needs right now. The Young Priestess, 2/1 for 1, is again good stats, and she's kind of like the opposite of that Swordsmith guy. At the end of each of your turn, she gives 1 health to a friendly minion other than herself, which is actually pretty darn annoying. If she doesn't die right away, she keeps making your forces tougher, and it's very irritating. And the fact that her stats are still relatively aggressive for the cost, she is actually a pretty good weenie. But I'm probably going to take the Defender of Argus, because again, I don't have much taunt, and this guy gives a lot of stats for his cost, if you have 2 minions alive on your turn to play him. It usually means you had to have 2 minions survive your opponent's turn, because 4 mana, for most of the game, you don't have enough mana to play 2 minions and pay 4 mana for this guy. Anyway, I'm going to take him, though, because he's pretty darn strong. The Light Warden, we saw before, is a Cold Light Seer, is a Murloc, not a lot of help for me. Just a 2/3, and it gives all other Murlocs +2 health when it comes into play. That includes enemy Murlocs. So, given the choices, I guess I'm taking the Imp Master, who 1/5 for 3, she's fairly tough, but she makes a 1/1 every turn. It's just interesting that way. She also damages herself, so she would also kind of be good for that draw a card for every damaged minion thing. But I don't know. That's a little bit iffy to call that a combo. Still, I'm gonna take her. She could make my Sea Giant cheaper, right? If there's her and then she makes another minion, if she can get another one after that, awesome. So we have another Defender of Argus, which is normally a pretty strong choice. I don't think he's gonna win out of this pairing. The Abomination is interesting. I mean, he's 4/4 taunt for 5. Those are pretty decent stats. And then his Death Rattle on top of that deals 2 damage to all characters when he dies. Now, the reason that he has perfectly decent stats and then has a really strong Death Rattle like that is because you don't control when that goes off, or at least most of the time you don't. He's taunt, so your opponent is guaranteed to be attacking him or killing him in some other way. And when your opponent kills him, he's going to do 2 damage to all their stuff, sure, but he's also going to do 2 damage to you and all your stuff. So he can be a very double-edged sword, which is why he's actually fairly efficient for the cost, if you can just get him to work out. But we're going to be taking the Frothing Berserker because he's one of the strongest warrior minions. Like, he's a rare for a reason. For 3 mana, he's a 2/4. Already I like him. Right? 2/4 is just like a good sweet spot of stats for 3 mana. You could get a 3/3 for 3 mana, but I'd rather have the 2/4 because it's a lot harder for things to kill him in one shot, and he does almost as much damage, right? He still kills, like, weenies pretty well. But this guy isn't really a 2/4 for 3, because his attack grows from damn near anything that happens. Whenever a minion takes damage, including himself, he gets +1 attack. If the Abomination goes off after you play him, whatever killed the Abomination probably did so by damage, so he gained 1 health for that. Then, he would take 2 damage from the Abomination. He'd get... Sorry, I said gain 1 health. He'd gain 1 attack from that. He would take damage from the Abomination. He'd gain 1 attack from that. For every other minion in play that took damage from the Abomination, he would gain another attack. From that one thing, he could gain like 5 or 6 attack, depending on how many minions are in play. And, oh, he's just a machine. If you have some stuff out and you're about to trade some minions for your opponent's minions, just like attacks where they both mutually kill each other, if you play him first, every time you do one of those trades, he's going to get +2 attack, because the two minions damage each other. He's sick. If you have 2 of these in play, it's especially ugly. If you have him in play and then you whirlwind attack, it's amazing. So he's very good. I still need more weapons. Okay, Tauren Warrior. Again, we've seen him before. He's just like the Amani Berserker, but with taunt. And I don't know, I find the Berserker is very efficient for 2 mana. This guy, and that's not horrible for the cost, but taunt on a minion that only has 3 hit points, and his attack is low unless he takes damage without dying somehow. I don't find that taunt works out very well based on his stats and other things. The Spellbreaker would give me silence. I've taken as many things as I could to kill enemy minions. Silence is often is at least half as good as killing a minion a lot of the time. Sometimes you can take a minion as a huge threat and turn it into no threat. So it's very good. 4/3 for 4. I think, though, my deck needs more actual fatness. I have a lot of cheap minions. I have a lot of medium minions. I think what I need is a Boulder Fist Ogre, because he is very efficient for his cost. Right? He gives you 13 points worth of stats for 6 mana. This guy costs 5 mana. He's got 10 points worth of stats, so that's a fair amount more, and it's well distributed. He's got attack and toughness almost the same, but if one's going to be higher, it's the toughness. That's kind of how you want your stats. He can survive lots of things. He still does enough damage to kill almost anything. Aha! See, I could take another Kokron Elite, who's fine. Silver Moon Guardian's not that bad, although I still like the Scarlet Crusader better. Because if you already have Divine Shield, so they're already ignoring the first attack against them, no matter how much damage it deals. Kokron Elite attacks the Silver Moon Guardian. Silver Moon Guardian kills him and takes no damage. If he attacks the Scarlet Crusader, same thing. This guy dies and deals no damage. Now, they can only do that once, and the next attack that hits him, she can be killed by almost anything. But 3 hit points isn't that much more than 1 when they've already survived a big blow like that. So I like her a lot better for the 1 less mana. But we're going to take the charge because this could be a game-winning card. If I get this early in the game, I'm probably going to save it in my hand as long as I can, because playing charge on the Boulder Fist, the Spiteful Smith, on the Baron Geddon, or a Sea Giant if his casting cost gets reduced enough by having other minions in play, can just be a game winner right there, hitting my opponent for close to 10 damage. So we're going to take at least one of those. I need weapons, though. 4/7 for 4. No abilities other than being a beast. It's not very exciting. You know I don't like him. He's a very strong, very popular warrior card, though. 2/2 for 2 is fine. You'd rather have an extra point of stats in there somewhere, but he doesn't get it because his ability is too good. So he's a 2/2 for 2 who casts Inner Rage. One of the first cards we saw, that 0-cost card, deals 1 damage to a minion, but gives it +2 attack permanently. That's exactly what this guy does. Except that you also get a 2/2 minion in the process. So he's great for if your opponent plays a Leper Gnome first turn, when you have 2 mana, you play this guy, you get a 2/2, and you use his ability to kill the Leper Gnome. It gets +2, but takes 1 damage, it's dead. Or, you could use, if you had this guy already in play, and now it's a new turn, he's ready to attack, you play the Cruel Taskmaster, deal 1 damage to him, and give him +2 attack. But, that would make him a 4/2, except his Enrage will go off because he's been damaged. He's no longer at full health. So, him plus his ability would actually be a 7/2. And of course that works with the Amani Berserker, right? So if you go second turn Amani Berserker, or better yet, if you're going second, this is a crazy play, is you coin out the Amani Berserker, right? Your opponent now has 2 mana to do something about it. There's a good chance they can't kill this guy, so they leave him alone. On your next turn, you have 2 mana for real. Without the coin, you play the Taskmaster, so you're still getting a 2/2 out of this deal, but you do the 1 damage to the Berserker, enraging him, and then giving him an extra +2 attack, so he's a 7/2. Hit your opponent for 7 on your second turn. That's sick. Even if they can kill him right after that, you've already done a lot. So we're taking the Taskmaster for sure. He's very good. I need more weapons. So you get another Twilight Drake, who's pretty good. Get another Frothing Berserker, who's amazing. This, I'm not counting as a weapon. Okay. It's an interesting spell. For 1 mana, if you have a weapon, So if I have my so far only one copy of Arcanite Reaper, seriously, I have 6 cards left in my deck. If half of them are weapons, I'm going to be a lot happier. If all of them are weapons, I'll live with it and probably take the weapons. But anyway, if I have the Arcanite Reaper out, it does 5 damage. It can be used 2 times. I could play Upgrade on it for 1 mana, and now it would do 6 damage and get an extra whole use. So the fact that this, for 1 mana, would give me an extra 6 damage attack is really strong. And it works pretty well on almost any weapon. That makes a big difference. If you don't have a weapon equipped, never fear. Upgrade is not totally useless. It's only mostly useless. Because if you don't have a weapon, it just turns into a 1/3 weapon. That is, a weapon that does 1 damage, but can be used 3 times. 1 damage weapon is pretty sad. Because you have to, if I hit a leper gnome with that 1 damage weapon, I can kill it, but I take 2 damage from his attack, and then his death rattle goes off and I take another 2 damage. It's just like the fact that you're taking the damage to hit something means that you really want your weapons to be doing more than 1 damage per hit. On the other hand, this would combo well with my Spiteful Smith, because it gets 3 uses. Even though it's only 1 attack by itself, if this guy has taken any damage, and so he's enraged, he gives +2 attack. Now this would have 3 uses at 3 damage, which is actually awesome. But that combo is unlikely to come up. The combo of this with my Arcanite Reaper is unlikely to come up. So I'm taking another Frothing Berserker because he's amazing. Tiger is pretty good. 5/5 for 5 is good stats, and he's got stealth, so he's unlikely to die to anything until he attacks once. It's kind of like a very slow 5-attack charge. The Ogre Magi is not bad either. 4/4 for 4 is perfectly reasonable, fine stats, and he gives you +1 spell damage. I don't have a lot of spells, so that's not a benefit. Then there's Execute. A lot of classes have a card that just blows up a minion. This is the Warriors version, and on the one hand, it's kind of a ghetto version. Like, Assassinate, you pay 5, it just blows up a minion. You don't have to do anything fancy, it just works. Execute can only damage a minion, can only destroy a minion that has been damaged somehow. If the minion's at full health, it is immune to Execute. But it only costs 1 mana. That is so cheap. If you can sacrifice if my opponent has out a Boulder Fist Ogre, and I have a Leper Gnome, that Leper Gnome attacks the Ogre, hits it for 2, and then I can pay 1 mana and execute it. That's well worthwhile most of the time. Or you can do tricks with... There are a lot of warrior cards that do 1 damage. Again, we haven't seen Whirlwind Attack, but it's just 1 mana, deal 1 damage to all minions. Now you can execute whoever the hell you want. Or, if I cleave the opposing minions, that anything that gets hit by that, I can execute. Although they had to have a minimum of 2 minions. If they had more than 2 minions, the cleave is random. But of course, the obvious combo is Cruel Taskmaster, right? I play him, do 1 damage to the enemy Boulder Fist Ogre, and then pay 1 more mana and execute it. That's fun. We're definitely taking the execute, whether or not it works out perfectly. So I could get another cleave. Again, I don't have as many things as I would like for killing enemy minions, but I have a lot of strong minions. I might just stick with that. The Rampage, I have a few things that would work out okay with the Rampage. I could Rampage the Imp Master, there's some stuff. Cruel Taskmaster something, then Rampage. If I have a minion out that's able to attack, hit it with Cruel Taskmaster, then hit it with Rampage, and then do a crazy attack. I don't think I can count on that stuff. Cleave's not my favorite card, and I have a weapon. I've got several charge minions. The Execute. I'm going to hope that I can kill some minions. I'm going to go with the Loot Hoarder to draw me a card, try and get my good cards faster. Okay, I'm going to count him as a weapon, because guess what? He's actually a really efficient card. He's a 3/3 for 4, and you can tell from the border that he's a warrior minion, so he's going to be more efficient than your neutral minions. 3/3 for 4, not the greatest stats, but he gives me a weapon with 2 attack and 2 uses when he comes into play. So 2 attack is still a little bit weak for something where I have to take damage to my face in order to use it. Right? If I want to kill the Murloc Tidehunter with my 2 attack weapon, it works, but I take 2 damage. But still, you're getting a 3/3 and two 2 damage attacks for this one card. So even if I take damage in the process, like that hurts. There, you can measure efficiency in a lot of different ways, and the fact that I'm taking all that damage is not great. But if I play this card and I get a 3/3, that's one card, and if I'm able to kill 2 minions with the attacks of that weapon, that's 3-to-1 card advantage, which is amazing. Or I could just use them to do a little bit of extra damage to my opponent if I'm desperate, whatever. It gives me more weapons that can trigger off weapon-related combos, because I am a warrior after all. I mean, at least if I have one of those out, my Bloodsail Raider is a 4/3 for 2 instead of just a 2/3. The Murloc Tidehunter is a pretty good minion. I mean, he's 2/1 for 2, but he also gives you a 1/1, so you're getting 5 points worth of stats, which is about what you expect from a 2-mana minion. And the fact that it's split into 2 minions, there could be a lot of advantages there, depending on what cards you have. The Silverback Patriarch I don't like very much at all. I mean, his stats aren't distributed very well. He doesn't have a whole lot of them. He's kind of hurting too much from the fact that he's a beast, and that cost him a point when they were designing him. Definitely the Weaponsmith. So I could take the Snapjaw, which I won't, because it's a boring 2/7. It's not doing that much for me. Frost Elemental, it's a pretty fat minion. It wouldn't hurt to have another fat minion. And I mean, when it comes into play, it freezes something. That's a big deal. I think I'm going to take another charge because it just gives me a little bit more of that potential to kill my opponent faster than they expect. And it can turn any minion into a charge minion, just to kill something on the opponent's side that has to die. So I guess I'm going to take this. It's not the strongest, but okay, here's my last card. We're back to Commanding Shout and Twilight Drake again. But I could also take the Azure Drake, who draws me a card when he comes into play. Now, his stats are a lot less efficient for the cost than the Twilight Drake. I mean, he does the same amount of damage. Twilight Drake is cheaper, and will usually be somewhere between a 4/3 and a 4/5, depending on when in a game you play him. But the fact that the Twilight Drake can be bigger for less mana is pretty good. But Azure Drake draws me a card. I like drawing cards. Could do the Commanding Shout. Now I can take a look at my deck and see how much I benefit from it, right? I have a lot of minions that have strong attack, but not very high hit points. I also have a lot of Enrage minions, right? If I have the Amani Berserker out, just play Commanding Shout and trade the Amani Berserker for like an enemy 3/2. Because of the Commanding Shout, he won't die. He'll be reduced to 1 hit point, and he'll get his Enrage. Plus, I drew a card for playing Commanding Shout. So I have that. I have multiple charge guys who, again, like they're like the where are they? Kokron Elite. They're fairly fragile, right? So if I play him and then Commanding Shout, he can probably kill something and survive. I've got the Enrage on him. Baron Geddon, I could play Baron Geddon and Commanding Shout and have Baron Geddon not kill any of my minions. He'll reduce them all to 1. He might reduce all the weak ones to 1 hit point at the end of the turn. But assuming it works out the way it describes, this should save my minions from him. It does draw a card. You know what? I think I'm going to take this. It's going to be a very interesting card. We're going to try it out anyway. Why not? It's the arena. We want to learn some things. So now I've spent a million years building a deck. Let's get to playing. Let's see how far I can get. So this is an interesting deck. I don't think it's that good, though, because for all the good cards in it, it doesn't have what I wanted. All I wanted was a whole bunch of weapons. The 2 axes are both common, basic-ass warrior cards. They're not even... They're not rares. They're nothing... You know how it likes to try and give you the same card again and again? That happens pretty often. Why couldn't it try and give me the 2-mana axe? It's 3 attack for 2 mana, 2 uses. Why couldn't it just give me a ton of that? This guy probably has way more weapons than I am. He's probably going to win. Even though my deck has a crazy amount of rares, I would trade a lot of those rares for just more good axes. You're too expensive for a starting hand. With the Cleave, I think I'm going to trade the Wolf Rider and try and get something a little bit more fighty. You know what I mean? something you can do damage and survive. Oh, there we go. That's way more fighty. Fighty is probably not a word, but I want minions that can mix it up. I do have a good first turn play here, so I'm not going to coin out something. It would be nice to save her till I had a weapon, but I know how few weapons I have in my deck, and they're both expensive. One costs 5 mana, and one comes with a 4 mana minion. So chances of me getting to use her thing are very low. I don't think very much of that minion, but the fact that it got to kill my 2/1 made it work out really well for my opponent. And also, I'm not going to coin out the Scarlet Crusader because he'd just trade a 1/1 to take out her Divine Shield. That would be a waste. So we're definitely playing her. And if my opponent ignores her, just hits me for 1, but plays another minion, I might be able to kill them both with Cleave.
Get in there and fight, maggot!
Ah, damn it! That's not what I wanted. He got so much efficiency out of that stupid-ass archer. She was killing way above her pay grade there. Very annoying. Again, as a warrior, using my ability is nowhere near as beneficial. Like some of the other classes, if your ability makes a minion, then you kind of want to prioritize using that ability. I would probably use that now against it if it was making a totem or a 1/1 like the Paladin, but I guess I'm going to have to play the Scarlet Crusader. I'm an idiot. I missed that I had a Twilight Drake. I should have coined out the Twilight Drake. It would have been like a 4-something. Well, this way, by saving the coin in my hand, when I play him, the coin will give him an extra hit point. But it would have been much smarter to just coin out the Twilight Drake, and it would have been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It would have been a 4/5. I would have had a Yeti on turn 3. Why did I not notice that? Stupidity. So he can just trade this to take out her bubble, or he might attack me. Okay. So that's interesting. Now I could cleave those guys, which would reduce her to 1 hit point and kill that. It's not worth it at all. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to play the Twilight Drake, so he can be big. That is a big Twilight Drake. And I'm going to use her to kill this. I'd kind of rather just attack the enemy directly with her because I don't care about his minions. But he could use the 1/1 to kill her. I'd much rather choose to have her kill the larger minion, leaving him with not much. So next turn, I could coin out the Boulder Fist Ogre, and that'll be a very strong play. That'll make up for the fact that I didn't play a Yeti or play a Yeti-sized Twilight Drake when I could have. So that's a very efficient minion, you'll know, because 2, 3 for 3, not horrible stats, not great, but when it dies, he gets a 2/1. It's actually got 4 attack and 4 hit points for that 3 mana, if you count them both. They can't both be there at the same time. Still pretty darn strong. Okay. I am, in fact... Yeah, I'm just going to coin out this monstrosity. I'm going to ignore the golem and start doing damage. The chances that he has a shield bash in there are pretty slim, but it's still worth taking out his armor, so he can't just armor up and kill this for 1 mana. It'd be 3 mana after armoring up, but you know what I mean. Or he could have gone shield block and then shield slam and killed this guy pretty easily.
What now?
Like, that's why this really exists. If you have the shield slam in your hand, you pay 2 mana, gain 2 armor. Pay 3 mana, gain 5 more armor. That's 7, and you could just shield slam for 1 mana and kill this right out. Okay, so he used Inner Rage. Remember, it does 1 damage to a guy. It took out his guy's bubble. I'm okay with that. I mean, I'd rather have the Boulder Fist Ogre because he's awesome, but my opponent spent a horrendous amount of resources on that. He spent an amazing minion that cost almost as much, and he spent another card, and he spent the good part of the Harvest Golem. So, yeah, that is fine. I can do several things now. I think it's tempting to do this to draw a card, but I'm really better off just getting out more fatness, and I'm going to keep hitting my opponent. Clearing the board would be smart. If he has that, as long as this is out, he could do some things. But a lot of the warrior's buffs just don't work on a thing that only has one hit point. He would have to buff its hit points somehow to get it damaged in order to do the main things that the warriors do for buffs. Okay, so he's damaged that some more. It was already damaged, so he didn't do that to execute it. He's got 4 mana, though. Is he going to play a Kokron Elite and take him out, or he's going to armor up? Wow. I guess he did that largely because he didn't... I probably would have killed the 2-1 with this guy and triggered his Enrage if I had a weapon, which I don't. But he doesn't know that. He thinks when I play this guy that I'm probably saving a weapon in my hand. It would have attacked his 2-1, killed it, and then played the weapon and hit for an extra 2. So, that's okay. Now, I could play this guy and charge him, but that doesn't actually do all that much damage. It's totally not worth it right now. I'm going to cast the shield block and hope I draw a Kokron Elite, mostly. Nope. Having both charges in my hand kind of blows. That is not what I wanted. But I can still hit him. Another reason he might have wanted to get rid of the 2-1 is if he hadn't, I could have cleaved. He would have had 2 minions, it would have killed them both. Because, remember, things that target randomly can still hit stealth minions. But you can see that with only 1 minion out, I can't play cleave. It's not because it's stealth, it's because there have to be a minimum of 2 enemy minions. Which I hate. I think this card's not very good. I really think they should change it so that it works if there's only 1 minion. It would just do 2 damage once. Alright, I'm just going to play him and armor up. Nothing too special. If he wants to trade his 4-2 for it, that's fine. It's a pretty even trade. But he'll probably use this to kill my Twilight Drake, since he's lower in hit points. Like, clearing the board is more in his interest. Not so much in mine. Ah, damn it. Okay. He used none of those zero-cost inner rages to boost that guy enough to kill my larger one. But now what's he gonna do? He's got lots of mana, only 3 cards.
What now?
So far, I'm way ahead in hit points. That's an interesting guy. I mean, 4-2 for 3. His stats are... Like, he has a decent number of stats, but they're poorly distributed because he's so fragile, right? But when he comes into play, he can destroy a minion with attack 7 or more. Just for free, kills a huge enemy minion. That's kind of awesome. Alright, so... Cleave won't kill either of his guys, because with the +1/+1 from this guy, the big game hunter now has 3 hit points. I could cleave and then execute this, which is kind of overkill. I could also just use the Kokron Elite to take it out. I think I'm going to do this, though. It's bad to waste my execute, but I have a lot of damage here. I'm pretty confident that he's low on cards. I'm pretty confident I can kill stuff. If I go cleave, execute... Sorry. It's a waste of an execute, sure. But it gets rid of that large guy who would have killed anything that I attacked with. Now, I can use this guy to kill that and get his Enrage. So if he's not killed next turn, he's going to do a ton of damage. And I can play the Kokron Elite, so I can still hit for 8 damage. He needs to kill pretty much all of my guys to even have a chance. And if I draw a minion, whatever it is, I can give it charge, unless it costs 7 or more. Yep. So I managed to beat another warrior. That doesn't feel like much of an accomplishment. Normally I hate mirror matches, but if I'm going to be a warrior in Arena, please show me the mirror matches, at least early on. We're going to have to see how far I can go, though, because my picture, my mental image of what would be a good warrior deck, this has a lot of decent stuff, but I would trade some of my really great draws. Like, 2 Frothing Berserkers is amazing, but for winning in the Arena, right now, what I think works best, I would trade these 2 guys for another 2 Arcanite Reapers. or one Arcanite Reaper and one of the other axe, Fiery War Axe. Even though these guys are rare and they're common, the weapons are what I need to make sure that I can kill everything. But we'll see how far I can get next time. Please click the like button, though there may be a small chance of lycanthropy. Just make sure the only animals around are good ones. You don't want to become like a were-toad or were-gerbil or something. And don't forget to subscribe to Demonac Games for more Hearthstone Arena and other gaming videos.